But let's go back to this. Nearly 100,000 people are getting infected with coronavirus every day, according to the results of a government-led surveillance study that suggests the UK is hurtling towards a second peak that could be bigger than the first. It's reported sage scientists are pushing for a more stringent lockdown that could be applied nationwide by mid-December. So should we be prepared for a second lockdown over Christmas? Let's talk this through and get the thoughts of Rod Liddle, columnist at The Sun and The Spectator, who's written on this. Good to have you with us, Rod. Good to see you in
Cheers,
vision
mate.
as well. I know you love the visual side of this medium.
Oh, I really do.
Yeah,
Yeah. I'm sure your viewers do as well.
yeah, they can't get enough of the Liddle, as many are texting in to tell us. So listen, I mean, you've taken this very seriously, by the way, slightly against type, and I say that because many people might think who read your columns that you would have a slightly different approach to lockdown, and you'd be out there thinking this is all bonkers and nonsense, and let's get on with things. But you have been incredibly careful in the last 6 months.
Yeah, I think the first lockdown was right, and I think we were too late to do it. I think we were woefully late to close our borders, and that will come back to haunt us, or has come back to haunt us. And I think we didn't take care of our care homes properly as well. And, I wear my no one likes us, we don't care mask wherever I go. I abide by the regulations. I'm beginning to think, though, that we have got it wrong, because we're in a very different position now to where we were in March and April. We know a lot more about the virus. We know a lot better how to treat it when people have got it, and we know who it affects. And it does occur to me that I saw a story recently which said that there was a 0.46 chance that an asteroid would destroy Earth on November the 3rd. I don't know if you've got anything planned for November the 3rd, Ian, but
I'm coming round yours, Rod, for a glass of Chardonnay.
Do that. But when you look at that, it seems to me we're not understanding risk properly. That there's a 0.24% chance that you will die of COVID. Then it seems to me that we are not handling this properly. And the average age of death, I think, is 84.2 years, and I suspect we can push that up a bit further with improved medical care. And it also seems clear to me that the vaccine isn't going to be a cure-all, that at best we're going to have to take the vaccine once or twice a year. Yeah. It's not going to do away with this problem. So I think my basic point at the moment is that I think we should probably start getting back to normal life and learning to live with the virus rather than trying to fight it.
Yeah, and certainly when I speak to clinicians, epidemiologists and the like, they will all say that actually we are far better prepared. It's no longer quite the shock to the health system when somebody comes in with COVID. They are better at dealing with it. They know what to do more than they did, despite there not being a cure, in inverted commas. But I mean, this idea that Christmas is going to be cancelled. I mean, these are the kind of headlines that if somebody had wheeled these out a few years ago, they'd have been subjects of a satirical show, not real life.
Yeah, they would, but it's worse than that, isn't it? Because I think Christmas is the short end of the wedge, to be honest, because I think Easter will be cancelled. It wouldn't surprise me if next summer was cancelled.
Yeah.
I think this is going to go on and on. Don't forget, back in March when lockdown was announced, we were told 6 weeks or so. And then it stretched to autumn, and we were let out for a bit. And I knew what would happen when we were let out. And you probably knew what would happen on July 4 when we all rushed down the pub. And this is going to keep happening. I mean, you will not be able to defeat the virus by lockdown. I just don't see it. I mean, the two countries which have done best out of this have taken completely the opposite approach. China had a very brutal lockdown, which the kind of thing which we just couldn't do in this country, I don't think. And it's fine. Its economy's back on track. There are very, very few infections. It seems to be moving ahead very quickly and easily. The other one is Sweden, which didn't have a lockdown, an official lockdown. And that's doing better than we are.
And that, of course, has been the comparison that has been made fairly robustly by many over the last, certainly over the the entirety of this, but certainly over the last few weeks, we hear more and more of that. I mean, there is going to be, as I think you're alluding to, Rod, there's something is going to have to give here, because we can't live in perpetual lockdown. So what's it likely to be? I mean, if there's no vaccine, and this is what we've been exploring today, there's no vaccine, and we know there are people still getting it, and despite the statistics, there are people still dying from it. What do we do? Where do we go?
Well, the problem is, I mean, the problem is a political one, not a scientific one. And the problem is that I think our government and the governments of Western Europe and the World Health Organization are gripped by one particular branch of the science without maybe looking at the other branches of the science. And I think probably our own government, certainly Rishi Sunak and probably Boris, think that we should be getting back to normal. I suspect they think that, but that they are hammered on all sides, partly by the epidemiologists, partly by the National Health Service, partly by the World Health Organization, and the received wisdom of this is that we can't do it. But there must come a point, there surely must come a point when we think, but hang on, that's 3 million cancer tests we've lost this year. How many deaths is that going to occasion in the near future, and in the middle distance, and start to actually analyze risk properly instead of reacting to this thing which is there and is immediately visible, which is why we've reacted to it, because you could actually count the numbers of COVID victims, whereas you can't say precisely how many cancer victims are going to die. So the COVID thing is there and present, and so we feel this need to deal with it. My suspicion, even as someone who is sadly edging into the vulnerable category, is that we have to is that we have to come out of lockdown and help those people who are vulnerable to shield themselves from the virus, but otherwise get on with our lives.
Yeah. While you're with us, Rod, and you've written a piece today in The Spectator about the school meal argument, another row that's formed a backdrop to our lively news agenda when we're not talking COVID. We're talking Marcus Rashford. What has been your take on this?
I think Marcus Rashford's an incredibly admirable young man. For a footballer, he's prosecuted his case with eloquence and decency and with real feeling, which are things you always associate with professional footballers, especially the top ones. But I think it's simply wrong. And when I talk to the real hard-working people, the people who particularly switched votes at the last election to vote Conservative, the red wall voters, this stuff infuriates them. They struggle along on a low wage and try to do the right thing. They only have kids when they can afford to have kids, and they make sure that their kids are fed and clothed properly, and they do all that from their own meager earnings. And then they look next door and they see someone with 6 kids, none of them fed, but with the skybox on the outside of the house, with a smart car in the drive, and with every kid with an iPad. It really rankles that these people get help, and that's why I have a bad feeling about it. I don't like the idea of nationalising children effectively, of franchising the way in which children are raised to the government rather than to the parents. That's my main problem with it.
Rod, on that point, thank you. It's always a pleasure. We'll let you get back to it. Stay safe. Rod Liddle, the journalist for The Sun, Sunday Times, and, of course, The Spectator, with us here on Talk Radio.